How much longer will see him?
I know, he keeps saying, he keeps threatening and not following through.
That's the key word. Just gonna threaten for a while.
No, that'll be, we had, our longest term employee retired. Brother was 43 years.
Okay.
Oh, right there.
Yeah, she was way down the river. Yeah.
So, well, we've got a few that are.
I can remember as a young guy, blowing on beach, doing tubes on landfills. Trying to.
Yeah.
Well,
Some other interesting stuff that we might find out.
Turning.
If the machine won't do it, you could do it by hand.
Good. Better, so it's better, yeah. Just tired.
I'm not close together.
Yeah.
I thought that was
yeah, I thought that was a film. Stop looking on Thursday.
You may come flying.
She's ours, it's usually
6:31.
We're gonna be recording.
We are. I'll be the IT guy today too.
How many hats do you have?
I don't know, not enough apparently.
He gets a low rate of pay for doing the IT stuff. Good to go?
Almost, I'll adjust the camera.
Okay. All right, we're gonna call the meeting to order and do the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Steve Marsh,
Present.
Joshua Pelletier, absent. Jeremy Snow, absent. Deborah Whitman.
Walking through the door. Hey, look at
Sorry,
time.
I'm late. And I'll just repeat, Deborah Whitman. Here. Kyle Soldier.
Here.
Kurt Bartra.
Present.
And Greg Newell.
Present. Thank you. I'm gonna ask for a motion to excuse, Josh and Jeremy. Who are those?
I make a motion to excuse Josh and Jeremy.
I second. So moved and must have. Thank you. We have a consent agenda. Consent of the February. We have the February 2024 agenda. And then we have to approve the minutes of the November 21st, 2023 meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
We have a second?
Second.
Approved unless noted. Public items or comments, these are for items that are not already on the agenda. Seeing as there's none, we will move on. Public hearings, we do not have any, so we're gonna close the public hearings. And we're gonna move on to our scheduled agenda items. We have new business. I don't believe we have any. We have old business. I don't think we have any other than myself. And so now we have our workshop. That's why town council is here, where we welcome them to an exciting planning board meeting. And this will be our forum with town council and residents to discuss the solar ordinance. You want to take it away, Jeff?
So we drafted up a solar ordinance probably a year and a half ago at least. It's gone through some edits, it's gone before the attorneys, it's come back, we've revised it again. It was back before the planning board for a workshop in October of 2023. The last time that was in front of the planning board. We've had, I believe, 2 or 3 moratoriums on solar that is 1.0 megawatt or larger in town. So this meeting is more or less to get the council, the planning board, and citizens together to try and figure out if this is the direction we want to go. Do we want to do something different to try and pull up something down, hopefully. So kind of leave it up to anyone to chime in where they want to go.
Do the review that council has done on this, are there any comments that we have not seen from the attorneys on this document?
There hasn't been anything since October of 23.
Okay.
So the second half of this packet is all the markups that Tim had made.
Okay.
And then the front part of this packet adjusted all those edits from Tim. Just the programming that they used was different than Microsoft Word, had a really hard time driving, so it was a lot easier just to print off Tim's edits, place them in the back, and then place all our revisions in the front. So those were the same revisions and everything that were in front of the planning board since October.
When do we want the public to have their piece? We wanna hear what the public has to say first and then have discussion, or?
That's totally up to you folks.
Yeah, I think the key is looking at this solar ordinance to make sure that, number one, Hermon is doing the best they can to balance the needs of the solar industry, balance the needs of residents, balance the needs of landowners who want solar, but also to assure that Hermon's protected so that we don't get into a situation where we have solar that's not forming, solar that's ugly, obtrusive, anything you want to think about. But it also gives that. And I think this one does provide you with the, like the personal scale solar, the minor, major, large scale, solar energy system. When you start looking at what's going to go on down at the Dysart Park on Dave's Way, that's large. And that's going to be what you typically see out there with all the arrays and everything down out back. This one's more for, so there's all those options, and it states where they can go, those types of things. So I think there's been a lot of work put into it on something that we have to have. So, Jess has spent a lot of time, the attorneys have spent a lot of time, the council has spent a lot of time. So now it's a matter of taking a look at that. And by all means, Greg, we do have 3 members of the public here. And why don't we open it up and hear what the public has to say to start with? If anyone would like to, we don't have to.
Just as a suggestion, until you all have a chance to speak, there really isn't any, we don't have literature like what you have.
There's some right back on the table.
But in order to digest what that is, I'd rather hear what you have to say, just, if that makes any sense.
And I think that's what we've run into here a little bit, in the discussions we've had at the council level. A big part of this is to kind of shed some more light on all the hard work that the planning board has put into this, and kind of just give a better overview of what the ordinance entails, because I think we got to the council level and we were, I think we lacked that part, and I can understand just exactly what Jeff was saying, you know, I think if we kind of summarize what the ordinance is intending to do and the scope of it, I think it'd be helpful to lead that discussion. Just by looking at the zoning part of it, I mean, it looks like it's mostly industrial zoning where these would be taking place.
Mostly.
I think that was part of the discussion, and that may have even come into with the comprehensive plan too. I don't know if we discussed that, or maybe that was
I can't remember.
I don't
So,
think
are you speaking or not speaking?
Well, I think we're gonna hold for a little bit until we do a little more back and forth. But I think what Josh, everyone's saying is, you know, when you start taking a look at it, for instance, as you were saying, when you look at industrial, you know, it's, you know, it's on page, so 1, 2, 3,
Roll line number.
5, 6, line item 174. You know, when you start looking through the areas like ag forestry, I'll pick on ag forestry. You know, roof mounted is, yes, it's allowed. Wall mounted, no. Minor, permit.
Yep, would be permitted, yep, and then S is site plan.
And then S is site plan review, and N is a no. You know, so when you look at that, when you have the large scale, and you kind of have to look at it, and it's just like with anything, you're looking at the definitions, you know, large scale. Excuse me. You start looking at large scale solar energy systems, that's bigger than half an acre and less than 10 acres, only one lot. So that's a pretty decent sized solar array. And that's where when you start looking at it, and you look at it, and someone wants to do that, when you start looking through for a large scale, it's no except for industrial. And, you know, that requires site plan, all those types of things. The major ones, ag forestry is a site, you know, requires site plan review. The rest are no, you know, residential A, residential B, residential C, village commercial, commercial. You know, minors, you know, those are, that can go through and be permitted.
Mr. Walsh, Mark, excuse me. I have an offer for my place, which is agricultural farm.
Mm-hmm.
They want to rent 2 20-acre plots there. And one, how can they offer me to rent those sites at $3,000 an acre, which would be nice to have, but they want to put it on 40 acres and 2 20-lot acres. How is it that they, with this, can offer me such a lucrative offer?
When we look at this, Mr. Seer, I don't know if it's allowed.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
You know, now, when you look at your ag forestry, and what we're looking at right here is a large-scale solar energy system. And again, when you look through the ordinance, ag forestry is a no. Industrial is a yes. You know, but unfortunately, your property is not industrial. You know, so that's what we're trying to protect all. Nobody likes being told what they can do with their property. But if we don't have some type of thing in here, it's going to be it turns into a detriment to all. So.
Can I ask you a clarifying question?
Yes.
So, on line 49, the paragraph cites that it's less than 10 acres. I don't see anywhere in here what the regulations are for more than 10 acres.
There isn't.
So what happens, so in his case, his project is 10 acres or more, so I feel like this document might be silent on that situation. Am I missing it?
No, it's just that we're not allowing there is no definition for anything over 10 acres, they're allowing up to 10 acres. So if he had a 10-acre plot in industrial, it could work.
And then, thank you for clarifying that, and then
And correct me if I'm wrong, Jessica.
No, you're right.
the other piece is, I've had people approach me about not allowing large-scale solar energy systems anywhere in Hermon. Is that an option that is available to us, and has the planning board discussed that, and what were obviously you put something forward that has large scale. I'm just curious, have you guys discussed not allowing them at all, and what the reasoning was, and moving forward with it?
I don't believe we ever really discussed that.
We discussed making sure that it would be in an appropriate area that wasn't a detriment to the neighbors and wasn't a detriment to, you know, you have farmland right next to it or something. So that's where the determination was that a 10-acre solar array would be suited to be in an industrial area. If you look at, Hermon has the industrial area is in the gray, so you can kind of see what's hitting you. Well, I put my glasses. Jeez.
Everything in the bottom right.
Yeah,
is in the
sorry.
industrial, for the most part.
And that's fine.
Route 2.
Yep.
Cobra, Pod.
Thank you. So that was the determination, so that there wasn't a complete no, but it limited the location it could be in.
And just to follow up on Danielle's question, so, I guess legally, if the council of the town just said, no, you don't want any large scale arrays, is that possible? Would there be any legal repercussions if the council said no?
I'm not 100% sure with that. I'd look to the town manager and the code enforcement officer. If it was determined that Hermon does not want large-scale solar energy systems whatsoever, obviously that would be removed. I think we could do that if we wanted to.
I think legally the council could do that
Yeah.
if they wanted to.
So one of the questions I still is wrestling with is, do we really want to use up prime and very little industrial zone for solar array? Is another question, instead of actually putting industrial business in there that creates jobs and
Taxpayers, right?
yeah, right. So I think that's a question we should still probably look at. I'd be more inclined to have it in ag forest than I would in industrial, just because of the tax base on that. So
So
kind of
from what,
Oh, go ahead.
you go.
Just to kind of touch on what Mr. Sear had said earlier, you know, he said he was offered for 2 20 parcel lots, which obviously wouldn't be allowed according to this plan. However, if they came back and said, well, we're actually looking for 4 10-acre lots, would it then be allowed? Okay.
It's not allowed in ag forest.
Okay.
His property is zoned ag forest.
Oh, okay.
Those would only be in.
I missed that, I guess.
Yeah.
And if he only has one lot, basically you'd have to subdivide to get another lot, put it all in. So you'd have to go that route.
So other than a place to start, this matrix that has the sizes and the zoning, did that come from somewhere, or did we just kind of pull that out of thin air? And, you know, I think at the beginning we talked a little bit about wanting to keep it in industrial, but I know over the past couple meetings we've heard people talk about, you know, I have this land. There's ways to situate a solar array in such a way that it's not going to affect neighbors, can't see it from other areas. You know, one of the big things for me, and I hate telling people what they can and can't do with their property, because I know that I would absolutely not enjoy that at all. But is there a thought of a variance process?
Um,
Or somehow redefine what we're looking at?
Right, so the original intent back when we did this for having it in the industrial zone was kind of see where it goes. You know, we had 3-phase power already out there, so it was already set up. Limiting the size, was hoping that it would go into certain areas like what, on the Dysart Phase 3 of their industrial park. You know, it's on a bunch of, I don't wanna call it useless because they're gonna be using it, but it was in a bunch of wetland, property that wouldn't be very well suited for commercial buildings. So it was a good fit. So we kind of just took that, that idea of how they used it there and just kind of went with it.
Cause that is the key, solar panels can go in spots where buildings can't, you know, because of the, you know, there's minimal site disruption. So you can get away with, you know, very small disruption of wetlands or something like that. So, yeah, I mean, it's there, but again, this is why we're doing this, we're having the open discussion. If the town of Hermon decides that they don't want anything, bigger than, you know, I can't remember, but bigger than a half an acre or, I take that back. I'm gonna look it up. Yeah. Well, 10 acres is the max. It's 0.5 to 10. And then you have 1,200 square feet to 0.5, you know, per major. And then you have no more than 1,200 square feet on any one lot.
And that one, behind the sports arena, that's larger than 10 acres.
Yes, that one is 20 to 25, probably closer to 25 acres.
Yeah.
That's a 4.9 megawatt.
And the one at Dysart that we just,
4.9 megawatt and probably right around 20 acres. Give or take.
and that is
20,
when the brakes went on.
Mm-hmm.
Time to stop, time to figure out what's going on. You know, seeing the writing on the wall. I don't know enough about the solar industry, but I do know that I've seen a lot of slowdowns, you know, as to, you know, there's still stuff going on, but, you know, right now Hermon has limited land, you know, and as has been mentioned, as Greg stated, everyone else, you know, we obviously want to maximize the land to the best of its extent possible for the benefit of the residents, to assure that our tax base is being taken care of. But as Jessica said, you know, the reason why it's the gray area is just because of that. There are areas in there that you're not gonna see the big warehouses, you're not gonna see that, you know, without major site work. And eventually there won't be any land and someone will spend that money for it, but that's where it stands. So long answers, but that is why it was determined based on other templates, based on comments, that we would at least give an option in industrial only.
So initially, I was in full support of the industrial development area, mostly for aesthetic reasons, and it just seemed in my mind to fit there. And then I started to think about lost opportunity costs, and now I'm opposed to taking up our very small industrial area to do this project, because not only do we miss the opportunity of placing business in our industrial park that can bring jobs to our community and a tax base, whether TIF or otherwise, to our community, we've tied up the land for something that the state gets to decide how much money we will or will not receive above and beyond, my understanding is above and beyond the initial property value. So I feel like I've been educated on how quickly the state will change their rules, and that will impact us, so we could end up in a situation where we have no additional taxes coming in, because right now, according to statute, I believe we can pass it along. So we're at the mercy of the state and how much they wanna reimburse, so I would be curious to hear what the other councilors feel. I'm very much opposed to it being in the industrial area, unless we could narrow it down even further to say industrial areas that are not appropriate for any other development.
Yeah, I would support that, just like Jessica was saying, some of these solar arrays were, you know, potentially going into areas where that land would not be utilized otherwise, right? So at least we get something out of it.
trying to think of how the mechanics of something like that would go. Whereas the town has not done a comprehensive survey of the areas, because they're private landowners, to determine who's going to state that it's buildable
Right.
versus not buildable. You know, so I think we get into the situation where, you know, you're almost best off, you know, unfortunately not allowing a large scale solar array, to be safe. But you have to take a look at it both ways and make sure that we're not, you know, right now it's industrial, you know, and like we've just talked about, I'm not arguing for or against, I just wanna make sure that everyone's talking through every option possible. And, if we wanna not allow that in the ordinance, then we won't. But I like the idea of saying, well, this land is a little less advantageous to commercial development or industrial development, but how do we make that, I don't know how to make that determination without a lot of upfront.
Well, I guess a follow-up question to that, I think it was mentioned earlier, right? So if this were to be passed, these large solar arrays could be built in the industrial areas. What about the power lines to transmit the electricity back?
Well, that's why, like Jessica was saying, in the industrial area, we have three-phase power out there.
Throughout, so if one of these less desirable areas were gonna be used to host one of these large solar arrays, is the three-phase already in place to go that far into one of these parks?
I think it's near.
Yeah.
If not.
So basically it'd be the roadside, and then I believe all the industrial parks have 3-phase as well. So if it goes off the road, it would be to whoever's developing it, CMP would have them bring it to the roadside, or versa.
So there wouldn't be any expense to the town.
Correct.
To actually transmit that.
There wouldn't be an expense.
It's no different if you got a commercial development that's building deep into a lot and they have to run their power line extension. That's on their cost, that's not on the municipality.
Or if there's a house that's being built far enough off the road, they have to pay for 1 or 2 telephone poles to be placed out of their own pocket to get it to the road.
So the three-phase lines would have sufficient capacity for, you know, a 4 or 5 megawatt solar array?
Well, we wouldn't be having I don't believe that is.
I think that would be determined by the utility
Yeah.
company, but at a minimum, they have to have 3-phase at the road
Yeah.
for that size.
But those 4.9 megawatt ones, those are, that's not even contemplated in this one. That's not happening. This is up to the 10 acres, which I don't know.
I'm not sure on megawatt size, depending on the type of panel, but you're probably looking at 2.5, so you're probably looking at, half of the 4.9 megawatt. About half
If
the
that.
average, if that, yeah.
If that.
And so that's the maximum capacity. These operate at like 10-15% capacity, right?
Some days, probably zero. Other days, but that is the key, is that the 3-phase is there. That's why, like, for instance, like, our subdivision, we don't have 3-phase. So then it's a matter of who's gonna run that are they gonna pay to run that 3-phase? No, they won't. So, but if someone can get to Route 2 or somewhere where there's 3-phase, then they probably will.
Well, the other part of that is what person circuits can handle.
That is absolutely right.
There's a certain amount of capacity that's used up already, and I mean, I don't know what the percentage of that capacity is, but, I think it's gonna be all on the one circuit, if it's just in that industrial area. And probably that's CMP over there, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, again, this is the idea of a working draft and working, we've had multiple revisions. I believe the moratorium is still in effect until
May, I believe.
May, and it can be extended again. It's just a matter of, this is good dialogue. This is good to hear what people are saying and determine
industrial zone, to your point, how are we gonna police, prove, state?
How are you gonna classify what part of the industrial is?
Is there a way to put it on the, if we make it require a site plan review, which it does, can we put it on their shoulders to prove to us it's I'm not a planning board person, so this probably sounds really stupid and I'm so
No.
sorry. But can we put the burden on the applicant to prove it so if they wanna do one in industrial area, can they then also have to prove that it's not buildable for other industrial purposes?
I'm gonna play devil's advocate and play that I'm the role of the developer, which I've done. I would probably work with my consultants to try and determine how I meet your ordinance and how I comply by stating that this land is not conducive to a large scale, and it's all gonna come down to the financial aspect of it, financial viability. And that's when it gets into who are we to say that it's gonna be, if they put a building on that lot, it's gonna cost an extra $1 million inside. If they put solar there, it might be $250,000. I'm just throwing numbers out just to be clear, just for comparison. So then it's the matter of the return on the investment is gonna be, well, no, $1 million for this, $250,000 for that. I'm gonna put solar.
You guys have put a lot of work into this, a ton of work. It's been to you guys, us. I'm really curious what the other counselors are feeling as far as the large scale, because I mean, if everybody is feeling we shouldn't be putting it in industrial, then that would sort of change things, or if there's no place to put it, I'm curious what the other counselors are feeling. That's an appropriate question to ask.
How much land do we have available in industrial parks? Any idea? I thought our land was getting pretty used up and.
I can't remember, I don't have that off the top of my head.
It all depends on what Dysart wants to do.
Yeah. They can keep going for a long time.
Well, I know that we've
And
just,
PPP.
When we talk unusable land, we talking like that strip that we have to, Dysart has to put a road through that it's wetland, are they able to put solar array in a wetland
they're gonna put it on both sides of that road.
on both sides of that road?
If that's the road we're thinking about.
Yeah.
Yes. And
Which
that's
That's
the key.
considered unbuildable property
Right.
on either side of that road, at least that's what Dysart told us, right?
I'm
It's
trying to
not
imagine my
desirable.
coworker saying that it's not developable.
Not developable, alright.
Well, I prefer to say that it's probably not as desirable of land. And again, that gets to the point of how do we classify that? One person's desirable may not be the same definition to someone who is going to work hard to try and get that done. So, I don't know how that one works, but it may be a situation where it's all or nothing.
So do we know, like, the impact, Kyle, on, like, the wetland part? Is it because of the very small footprint and not so much the coverage?
Yeah, it's yes, I mean, quite literally, the footprint,
The
like where the
pole and
supports are, and,
So they still have to, they can still only impact X amount of wetland without triggering.
yeah, and that's outside of my area of expertise, but, yeah, that would count towards whatever thresholds
Same
you're
idea.
looking at, yeah.
You have 100,000 square foot warehouse, that's gonna be 100,000 square feet plus parking for, impervious area. When you're looking at solar arrays, you've got probably a, 2 foot by 2 foot, footing, maybe a 3 foot by 3 foot. So you've got 4 square feet, 9 square feet times X amount dotted around. That's quite a difference. That 100,000 square foot warehouse, that you typically see that sucks up a lot of wetlands very quickly. So,
I'd be inclined also, like, I think we should move away from the industrial area. I wanna know what people's opinion are about ag forestry, about allowing it in that section, as long as we put in provisions of like, you know, this isn't gonna be right on top of someone's property line or, you know, right along the street or something like that. I preferably, I'd almost say no large ones, but I think also looking at the aspect of people wanting to do what they want with their own land, I think we could probably make it to where we could have them put it in ag forestry and still be okay. Especially if we're not going at the 20-acre range. You know, I think it's possible, but I'd love to hear what other people have to say.
I guess my concern if it was to shift to ag forestry, it almost seems like that's the buffer for Hermon, because that land can be used for farms, but it can also be used for houses, and worst case, it could be turned into industrial. And so I would actually be, I think, more concerned if we moved in that direction.
All right.
Okay.
I know when I first looked at this, I thought the industrial park was a great place for it. But listening to some other residents, I kind of agree with Kyle. You know, we're trying to tell people what they should do with their own land. And we have some very good people in this town. Some of them are sitting right in this room that would make sure that it was taken care of the right way that it should. But not everybody's going to do that. So where do we draw the line? And how do we police that? I don't know.
That's the tough part within the ordinance, you know, it's, unfortunately, the ordinance can't go towards the person, it has to go towards the land, or it has to go towards the use. You know, and you're absolutely correct, there's a lot of great people that will do a lot of good stuff. So that's where the ordinance was trying to provide enough, allowable uses for their properties to assure they can get the return on their own properties. Not only the return on their properties, but also for betterment, like I said, of the citizens of Hermon. So that's the tough balance.
I can ask, so on the other end, you know, you've addressed, the ordinance addresses the decommissioning of these large solar arrays. The way it's written is that a surety bond or some kind of bond would have to be established at the beginning to cover the cleanup. And the way that is set up is that has to be equal to 150% of the estimated cleanup cost. So is that the estimated cleanup cost based on today's figures? Does that factor in inflation and the life of these solar arrays? Because you know, $100,000 today is not going to be worth anywhere near that in 20 years. And so I'm wondering about that. And then you know, I have experience with performance bonds. You know, contractors, they get them for large projects. They go to an insurance company. There's an underwriting process. They look at the financial statements. I don't know how it would work for like a 20 or 25 year commitment. You know, I suggested probably a year or so ago when we were talking about this. You know, banks provide irrevocable letters of credit. Those are secured by cash, and they do not go away until, you know, some obligation has been met. And so I guess I would also be concerned at the other end how that cleanup is going to be supervised. I think this it looks good. I just don't know if it would actually work that way. I would want to know more about how the surety bond would work.
I thought there was a provision every 5 years, the cleanup cost was reevaluated, wasn't it? Was that an earlier version?
I can't remember. I'd have to look into that. I do know I asked him about the surety bond versus the irrevocable letter of credit, and I did get a reply back. I'll have to follow up with him on that. Just making sure that you know, it would work. So I'll have to follow back up with him on that.
Because if there was a 5-year limit, so what happens if the premium isn't paid?
Right.
Does that bond just go away?
Yeah, we'll have to.
Wasn't there something with the state too?
There is something that the state requires of many of them,
That
but
the state was requiring too?
I can't recall. Off the top of my head.
What line is the language on the, that we're talking about?
I don't have it on the actual line. What I'm talking about is on page 15.
We're on 600.
Mine's
there a
600,
line?
thank you.
It also looks like in the lawyer's markups in the back, in red, that some of the sections of decommissioning were struck. So I'm just wondering about that.
It's gone through, it's a very, very good point, because who knows who's gonna be here? I'm probably not gonna be here, you know, I mean, it's just, who knows what's gonna happen.
That's been my concern all along,
Yes.
is who's gonna take care of it? The landowner,
So,
the town? What
right.
do you do if the landowner doesn't take care of it?
And I feel like there was language in here that didn't allow it to default to the landowner. And I think that should be, I mean, ultimately the landowner's responsible for their land.
But
In
I
my
remember
opinion.
something about this state ordinance or something in the state of Maine.
Well, there's a lot of
it's
state
right above.
laws.
Something
Section
about,
B.
There can be as many laws and rules and everything you can,
Right.
but if somebody is gone bankrupt, or if they don't have the funds,
Yes, I've heard that.
I think depending on the size, you do have to have something through the state
right,
on that, but
So
again,
2B,
who
right?
knows where the state's gonna be in another 15 or 20 years too.
exactly, and we actually said that in one of our meetings.
to be or not to be.
If I'm understanding it correctly, it doesn't allow it to fall to the landowner, and if that can be removed, and, I mean, these landowners are making significant amount of money off this project. I think that they should be ultimately responsible if the person they're doing business with doesn't come through. They can go to court with that person, we don't need to go to court with that person.
I almost feel that's part of it is because it's the developer, you know, whoever they come in. For instance, somebody, you know, works with Mr. Sear, and I'm just picking on you, and says, you know, I'm gonna do all this, I'm gonna do A, B, C, D, I'm gonna make the world great for you, all these things, and that you lease your land to them. You know, that is something that, you know, the owner has to be wary of. But it also comes down to, this is the company that's promising X, Y, Z. And that's where I believe the surety, because they're the ones getting it, not the landowner. I think it almost have to get to a point where the landowner is a part of that development and is the one providing the surety. And, you know, they could forfeit their land. The land's already kind of forfeited the minute that solar arrays all jump on it until they decommission it.
Minute they
remove
sign the
everything.
lease.
Are you saying the same thing then? Are you saying
I'm
ultimately?
saying similar thing, but I just don't know how the lawyers are going to finesse that, because, of, you know.
Mrs. March,
Yes.
in the religion of green, that they are, state and federal governments are taking vast amounts of our tax money and throwing it at these electrical and the solar and wind farms. They are funding to make it lucrative for those people to go in and make. The problem is that CMP and Versant are required to buy that power from the solar companies, and they buy it at a premium. But in state law, the power companies are required to sell at a loss on the energy markets. Again, they're putting the burden on the people, one, to pay for all these people to come in and build it, and two, the ratepayers are gonna end up paying more money for the solar electric. If you really want to be green, you had the Hydro-Quebec power line coming down, and all kinds of out-of-state money came in to shut it down. And that is the ultimate of green energy. The other one is nuclear.
That won't fit in the industrial zone.
But there are other places in the state of Maine that you could put nuclear back in. And the, people who say it's dirty, yeah, you have the chance of, if somebody's dumb in there and they get a meltdown, that'd be a big, big problem. But hydroelectric's where you go, and they're going around tearing down all the dams now. And the other thing is, those solar panels are very dirty. They take a lot to produce them, and they, you know, tear up the ground to get all the metals and stuff to go into it. And, what is it? What assurance do we have that they're gonna take these solar panels when they're done and refurbish them or take all the bad chemicals out of it instead of burying it in the ground?
That is where the ordinance tries its best to assure that they meet state, federal requirements, those types of things. There are very specific standards on the disposal, on the decommissioning, those types of things, and that's where the ordinance follows that.
Can we transition for a minute to personal scale ones?
Yes. That's a personal skill.
Scale.
We'll try.
So on line number 243, PSSES major, there's a paragraph B that talks about upon completion of installation, they shall blah, blah, blah. I noticed there were differences between what was required of minors and major, and I'm wondering if that paragraph in particular should also be in the minor, because I think we want them to maintain it, even though it's a minor one. And there were a couple of other sections, H, K, L, and M, that I thought should be on the minor as well as the major. They were just monotony. And then finally, there's no language that I saw about decommissioning or abandonment in these situations, and do we need any language? There was a timeline language, I think, on the major, but nothing on the minor. I realize the financial impact may not be so great, but I think the expectation that you have to take care of what you have and you have to get rid of it, if it doesn't work, should still stand for all of them.
I'll let Jesse,
Yeah, we can definitely take a look at that. I think the idea behind the major, it was only allowed in a couple zones where the minor is more set towards, it's been a bit,
All zones.
yeah, it's in all zones. So yeah, we can definitely take a look at that.
So, Chelsea, just for the sake of reference, like the corner of Route 2 and Hillcrest,
Okay.
that would be one that would fall under personal minor.
Personal minor, yep.
Okay, so that's the scale that we're talking about when we're in that category.
Yep.
1,200 square feet is the max, so.
I didn't go measure it, so just trying to.
Well, I mean, I'm just, for purposes, I can't remember how big this room is, but 40 by 30 is 1,200 square feet, so. I mean, they use that to power their home, something like that, but I think there's still the buffering, those types of things that go on. But yeah, no, good points for the minor compared to the major for the responsibility. It does stay in there for the major about 12 months and must do all those types of things, but
Did I say something? Possibly.
No.
Of course.
Yeah.
In June, I was looking, when I was doing my research, said in June, the state legislature passed a law requiring developers to obtain approval from the Department of Environmental Protection for all projects that are 3 acres or more and show plans for funding and decommissioning the panels. Is that helpful at all?
Yes, that's, I think, what Deb was talking about, we were talking about, the state has,
But that was just in June that they passed that. I didn't know if you had that already.
they have jumped in to state that there are these rules that are out there, and that's what the ordinance follows, kind of mirrors onto that for state and federal rules and regulations for decommissioning. But thank you.
But it was also part of the gap we were trying to close too, because that allows up to 3 acres without
Right,
really
so
any
ours has
decommissioning.
Right,
Yeah.
1,200 square feet or.
And then I think it was, wasn't it kind of vague about who was even going to monitor that type of account, or what if there was no money in the account to decommission anything?
From the state, we're here to help.
I think that goes to Steve's point about, and maybe Steve can speak to it differently, but that's why the line of credit, the irrevocable line of credit is so important. It's the one thing that will stand the test of time. Because, I mean, if they get a loan, I can't speak to Steve can, but most loans I've had get reevaluated every 5 years, and this is a project that's way beyond 5 years, so.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I've had construction projects where, if they can't provide a bond, it's 20% irrevocable letter of credit. And, you know, for a $1 million project, that's a $200,000 deposit. It sits there. So it's valuable money.
It's a lot of money.
It's tied up.
The other
But
piece
I
is,
can't remember why the attorney struck that. I didn't like the letter of credit.
the other piece
I'll
is
have to follow back up with them on that.
on the decommissioning cost that we talked about earlier, the 150%. Is it possible, instead of tying it to something that we're estimated and unknown, can we tie it to something that is known, such as the cost of the project? Can we make the amount that they have to provide related to the actual cost of the project, as opposed to what we have no idea really the estimated decommissioning cost might be?
But if you do it that way, if you say just randomly it's 20% of the project cost, that may not translate into enough funds to actually cover the cleanup.
That's correct.
I would agree, and I think whatever percentage we choose needs to be, I think that I feel like I stole this from somebody else in another state. I think there's already numbers out there on what the estimated decommissioning cost is compared to the project cost, but I could be wrong.
I think I kind of agree with Steve, because you could have $1 million solar project and state that you gotta hold 25%, so they've got 250,000 there, and the cost of decommissioning comes out 400,000. You know, I have no idea if these numbers are real, or I just have no idea. But I'm just saying, if it's tied to, you know, you will be paying X amount for the going rate, and you're still, you know, even if, you know, worst case scenario is that there's a irrevocable letter of credit for X amount, but legally they're still on the hook for what it will take to decommission, but at least that, kind of like retainage on a big project, you've held it, you've got $100,000 in your pocket, the work to finish it should be 80,000, but took 120, they're still on the hook for it. So
I like that.
it's just, and that's a standard and typical way. You know, we're talking a lot of hypotheticals about 15, 20 years down the road, so it is hard to dictate that.
So how do you determine what the cleanup cost is gonna be?
I'm not sure.
It's basically an engineered formula that they would bring for the site plan.
It would be the engineer for the developer, or would the town have a separate engineer?
I think there was a provision in here that there was, that the developer had to pay for a third party to provide that estimated cost to us.
I would think that third party would wanna be, the town would wanna hire that third party to be billed to the developer.
Okay, we can word it that way, yeah.
What would keep these power companies, solar companies from selling the solar farm to foreign entities so that they could get carbon credits to continue producing carbon? So the business will keep going.
I don't know if there's anything in the ordinance that would preclude them from selling.
Well, my concern is not so much selling it, but cleanup comes and it's owned by a foreign company, are they obliged to pay the cleanup costs?
The only thing is, if an irrevocable letter of credit is put in place, that's gonna stay.
Okay.
So if, yeah,
Stays with the project
Transfer
regardless
fees
of
of
the,
project.
regardless of who the entity is that owns it.
Yeah.
You know, the worst part's gonna be is if the costs are greater than the letter of credit.
I guess I would like to echo what Richard was saying earlier, though, as far, I'm certainly not an expert, but from a banking perspective, I have looked at certain green energy projects. And from what I understand, based on the efficiency of these solar arrays, the fact that they only work if they can charge, the power companies a premium, and they still rely on different credits, renewable energy credits, to make them work. They're not viable if they just have to go in, create, the solar farm and sell electricity. They're relying on taxpayer dollars to make it work.
Yes,
So I guess the real question to the whole group would be, do we even allow anything over a half acre in town? Because if we don't even allow anything over a half acre in town, then all this other stuff would be, I don't want to say a moot point, but would be like, do we really need to worry about it?
Well, that means that's what we originally started with, is do we want the large scale solar? Because I think that's where the leap goes, if I'm reading it correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong, just the major goes up to half an acre.
Yeah.
And then large scale goes from half an acre to 10. So if the large scale was eliminated, you're left with personal scale solar energy system major, personal scale solar energy system minor. And then you have the wall mounted solar energy system.
I would hate for you guys to go back and do all kinds of work on this based off our comments, only to come to the council and us to be like, we don't want that on there, yank it out and pass it with everything else. I mean, I guess.
That's why we're here.
And I'm not sure, I would love to hear from all the counselors, I know I said it again, I'm gonna say it again, I'd love to hear from all the counselors, the direction they're feeling on the large scale. Because again, if we're all sitting here thinking that we don't want that, because our town really isn't built for that, the way we're set up, then I think it's important that we know that now before you all go back and do more work.
It's very simple for me, if we look at our mission statement, right, look at the last line, we're, as a council, right, we're supposed to be dedicated to maintaining a rural setting. When I think about rural setting, I don't necessarily vision, large solar arrays in that rural setting. A lot of us moved up here, stayed here in this area because we wanted some of that displacement from those, metropolitan service areas that have these things peppered all over the place. And that's what always comes back to me. It comes back to that for me. So we can talk about large half acre, but it always comes back to that last piece, right? Where they're not making any more rural areas. What's out there is there. And even that's being developed at an exponential rate in the second district, right, here in Maine. So it's pretty clear cut. I don't agree with I'm like Mr. Sear. We should have stayed with the hydro. If it's truly an environmental impact that we're trying to influence, then we should have stayed with the hydro.
And it's cheap.
We don't have a hydro problem.
Nope. So.
I mean, we've heard from a few, but I don't know if you poll your councilors. And very simple, if the council isn't gonna accept it, then we're not gonna put it in.
Right.
Did anyone from the public want to say anything else?
I'd like to hear from the public.
Yeah, I would.
Maybe that would help us too as well.
I think the public would be you, Mr. Byers.
All right, there's so much I could say, but
Right.
Alright, on the spot,
Here, have a mic.
have a mic? I don't talk very loud, maybe louder now. There isn't gonna be any more 5 megawatts, the state's seen to that. There's really gonna be 1 megawatts, 2 if they're really lucky.
the distance between these really will not be any closer than a mile together. It's not possible for them to do that. So if you take the whole town and you start, okay, let me back up just a little bit. Large scale solar to me is what's going on down in the Waterville, Oakland area. It's 147 acres. That's large. That's huge to me. Up here, some of the smaller ones, and I consider smaller, could be up to 20 acres, but in a location that can't be seen from the road, is backland that nobody's using. Why isn't that a usable thing? I think, personally, when you look at this draft of the adopted or the allowable places, I think it should be in most areas. But make your setback rules, you know, whether it's 30 or 50 feet from the side, whether it's 500 feet from any roadway, that's all doable. But why are you gonna just shut down the solar is? Are they're not gonna take 20 acres because they can't do any more than 1 megawatt at a time. So you're gonna be lucky if you get 7 at the most, and then possibly more later, but it's only if the system can take it. We have 3-phase power on Route 2, we have 3-phase power up here, we have 3-phase power on Annis Road. So there are places to connect to be totally out of sight, and you're never gonna know that it's there. You know, do we all want to drive by and see the golf course littered with it? No, I'd like to see the nice green lawn. Do we have any more farmers that are left in this town? No, they're almost all gone. That's gonna become houses for businesses. Businesses not so bad, knocks down the tax. Because if every kid that goes to school is gonna drive the taxes up. Well, if you take this land and it goes to solar, that's less houses. I could sell my land. It could be gone. It already could have been gone. It could have been all houses. It's not what I want to see for this town. I'm not the only one that's here that believes that. So this is an option. It leaves you 20 to 30 years out. You get your land back. Do with it what you want with it. But as a taxpayer in this town, I think it should be within my right or others. I don't know who here has more than 20 acres. So there is a few. So you can appreciate having that kind of land. I don't live in a subdivision. I've never lived in a subdivision. And I want to tell you what to do on your land that's there. I don't. You know, do I want to see a junkyard beside my house? No, not really. But this is a chance for us to bring revenue to the town. And I understand your point of the state is funding them. They're making more money for their power. But on the flip side, they're offering any customer that wants to sign up for these 15% discount on your power bill. That includes the school system. I've already seen the numbers. That means you could save $50,000 a year just in the school's electrical problem. You know, why wouldn't you do that? You can go back for lost revenue to the state, ask them for that money to come back in, and you'll get something. And if the 4 or 5, that's probably all that's going to be here for these fields in this town, that's $250,000 a year initially. Goes down fast? Yes, it does. But that's money that's in your account. They don't take that away from you. But the state has shut down, and there won't be any more of these big ones for now. So do I want to see 200 acre? No, I don't. But smaller, and I think you could write this so you could get up to 10 acres, 20 acres in places that aren't seen. Why wouldn't you do that? What harm is that going to do to the rest of us that are here? So, with that, I'll leave you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Mr. Byers brought up a good point. I'm curious, with the solar array off of behind the sports arena, has the town received any benefit from that, or discounted electric or anything like that? I don't know enough about it, and that's why I'm asking.
That's not community solar. That's on a larger scale, and you won't get that.
So
that's what I mean. There's a difference between. I'm sorry if I'm speaking out of turn.
Go ahead.
There's a difference between large scale
and these community solar systems.
Can you come back up here and explain that, please, like,
I don't-
at a kindergarten
I'm not-
level?
I'm probably not the perfect person to explain this, but community solar are these gardens, these farms, and they're usually not over 2 megawatts. People can subscribe, or businesses can subscribe. You don't even have to have them in your town, it can go somewhere else, but they're offering 15% deduction on your electrical bill. You sign up for it, and when you get the bill, you go back through, they credit you, the solar company credits you 15% of what this power bill is. So you have money that's coming back to you. Considering what the school uses, it's about $50,000 a year. It's sizable. They're trying to influence it. I'm sure the same way, even when they came out with cars and trying to get rid of horses, it's never gonna work. Well, it does work. And there's only gonna be so much oil, natural gas, coal here. We can't use it all.
So can you explain why Dyson's isn't a community
It was done before this.
before the state regulation?
It was done before they limited the size of solar fields.
Oh, so the
That's
size
why-
of it's what makes it not.
That's, yeah.
Thank
So
you.
regulations change, like you, I don't know all the ins and outs, but I know that that was done before, and now they've reduced any of the sizes. Well, you can't get to that size that they want. You'll never use 20 acres to get 1 megawatt. It's not, you'd just be wasting land at that point. But, does that make sense?
Are we talking Dyson's or sports arena?
It's both, a little bit of both, because they're both came in before.
Okay.
You know, but I appreciate that very much so, Jeff, because the community solar, I mean, that's where, I mean, I get hit quite a bit from, you know, the sales pitch, you know, from next era, or I can't remember the names, but, you know, and the problem is the details. And yes, it is cheaper, but if you're not paying attention, it doesn't stay cheaper after a while. And that's nothing to do with solar, it has to do with the benefit that they're trying to give, and you need to make sure you get it. So, that was similar to 10 years ago, 10 or 12 years ago, when they were selling, you know, when CMP and everybody, you know, different, instead of the standard offer, you go with us, you know, and I will admit, our company went with one, but someone wasn't paying attention and missed the deadline, and for 2 years they have to pay up here because they didn't re-out. So anyway, it's just the there are different avenues to it. Man, you wanted to speak?
Yes, please. These are. This is this is an excerpt from an article from Forbes magazine, and it looks at a different aspect of I gave it to the town council. A different aspect of solar, because I thought there'd be more people here speaking, because I think that the call went out to ask people to speak, so I'll answer the call. So I'm only gonna, by the way, just as, my name's Hermon, I live across the street here over on Tennessee Drive. When I lived in Mars Hill, I was the head of a group that tried to stop the Mars, there was 33 wind towers going up on top of Mars Hill Mountain. And we weren't even asked if we wanted to have that until after all the papers were signed, all the leases were signed. And when we tried to hold their feet to the fire, what they were gonna do with those wind towers once the, you know, we had a meeting and we had a group and we asked them, what do you, you know, will you do, put something in escrow to take these towers down? They're no longer viable because a lot of times they catch on fire, they leak oil, and, you know, they only last so long on top of a mountain like that when they're struck by lightning so many times. And so they told us, well, they're gonna make good scrap. That's what they said. No interest at all in trying to deal with, I mean, when this is all over, when those are no longer viable, those 33 wind towers are gonna be sitting there for a long time. So nobody's gonna take them down. Okay, so I'm looking at one aspect of solar industry. And if you've ever experienced the frustration of looking up information on something that the national government and the state government is trying to push, you're gonna find any information that you might be looking for that would be of interest to you, like 5 pages in the search engine, right? So, but I could discuss, I looked at discussing a lot of stuff. SPRECs, which are the solar renewable energy credits. There's a lot to cover there. One of the things would be that I did read, I gave people in town council each one of the articles. One of the articles did discuss that a lot of these community solar credits are coming from out of state, not even coming from this town, I mean from this area, because 60% of these, according to Jim LeBrecq, are not even hooked up to the system. We don't have the grid. We don't have the capability. And Scott Jellison said that what was happening is when they put these online, it would blow up people's electrical house. It would affect their house, their electrical systems in their house. So because you get surges of electricity when you get sun, and then you don't get any. So I mean, there's a lot to go along with these solar renewable energy credits. And the other credits that Mars Hill we dealt with were the RECs, or the green credits, sold to companies who don't or can't use clean energy processes, and a lot of them get sold overseas. They all cost you, the taxpayer, money because we're subsidizing building of these solar arrays, and also the wind towers that we dealt with. But, and also, one thing of interest today, in the last couple of days that's come out, is, I don't know if you're aware of this, I heard it on the radio, and I also read it a couple of places, where, that JP Morgan Chase, State Street Bank, and BlackRock are all backing up this thing called Climate Action 100, or the 100 biggest companies that are pushing this clean energy. And they're taking their $14 trillion investment with them. So if you don't think that's going to affect what's going on, and as far as subsidizing these, that's why everything's slowing down. That's why they're not doing the offshore wind. That's why a lot of these smaller projects and they're making them smaller all the time. So that support, I believe, is going to disappear, because without most of you, I don't know if you know aware of these companies, they own pretty much a good chunk of every company in the world. And they do determine, people on the boards and stuff like that, and where things go, the direction they go in. So that was on the news today, on the radio, when I was coming down from Millinocket, and I read it yesterday, which is why I put it in this report. So the renewables are going to dry up, in my opinion. And one of the things that's going to happen will be that you're going to lose a lot of that money that people were going to use to remove those solar arrays. So I think that's a problem that you really need to look at. I think I gave you an article that refers to that, and I gave everybody different articles because they all have different points of interest. So I'm going to do my the environmental disaster of solar energy. Solar energy is terrible for the environment in quite a number of ways, including that large land areas, although not always large land areas, are devoted to it. Another problem with solar energy is to produce vast quantities of hazardous waste, which is not adequately dealt with. The last few years have seen a growing concern over what happens to solar panels at the end of their life. The problem of solar disposal will explode with full force in 2 or 3 decades at the end of the current panel's lives. And it will wreck the environment, as it will be a huge amount of waste and they're not easy to dispose of. The reality is that there's a problem now because some of the panels are already, they weren't made well or something, and that they get cracks and breaks and they don't work as well. So the reality is it's a problem now, and it's only going to get larger, expanding rapidly as a photovoltaic industry expanded 10 years ago. Contrary to previous assumptions, pollution such as lead or carcinogenic cadmium can be completely washed out of fragments of solar modules over periods of months. For example, by rainwater. The following statement comes from solar industry insiders. Cadmium is a particularly toxic waste product. The fact that cadmium can be washed out of solar modules by rainwater is an increasing concern by local environmentalists, which I'm not one, but by local environmentalists, where large solar farms are being proposed, and 10 acres is probably pretty large. I mean, it could be on your house, actually, when you think about it. Leaching out, if you have a crack or a tree branch hits your house, or, so leaching from broken or cracked panels during natural events such as hail, ice storms, hurricanes, extreme winds, and in other areas you get tornadoes, earthquakes, all that sort of thing. But the biggest concern is decommissioning. This is how OSHA describes cadmium. Cadmium and its compounds are highly toxic. Exposure to this metal is known to cause cancer, and it targets the body's cardiovascular, renal, gastrointestinal, neurological, reproductive, and respiratory systems. And the decommissioning of solar panels in regular landfills, of course, is not recommended because they break those things up to get them to squeeze more stuff into the landfill. And what that does is it leaches into the toxic materials leach into the ground, the same as they do if you have broken solar panels on your arrays. The toxic chemicals through rainwater leach into the ground, get into the groundwater, and we drink it. Okay, so that is a big problem. So where do most decommissioned panels go? They go into landfills. Recycling is often recommended, but like the wind towers, it's not practical because the recycling costs are more than the economic value of the materials that are recovered. So, which is why most solar panels do go into landfills. Now the landfills also leak and they get into our groundwater. So some might ask, don't all sources of energy involve hazardous waste? Yeah, well, yes, but the volume of waste produced by solar panels and wind turbines vastly exceeds that associated with other reliable power sources, which is shown on this chart we have attached. Solar panels never produce electricity at night. They don't produce much when it's cloudy. And in a northern climate, not when they're covered with snow or ice. For example, in Minnesota, I don't have anything on Maine, but in Minnesota, panels produce only electricity barely 20% of the time. Now I know that those wind towers, they say produce electricity 33% of the time. I know that's a lie, because I've seen them. From what I understand, it's like 16 or 17% of the time, and that's probably an exaggeration. But I mean, you see them when some are going and some are not. That's because in order to get the subsidy, each tower has to run so much time, and it has to produce so much electricity. So if they don't turn some off and some on, because the wind could be blowing hard, and they're not all going, and it's not going into the grid. Actually, it goes into the Canadian grid, but those wind towers do not produce electricity. They're even less viable, probably the least viable source of energy there is. So most solar panels don't produce electricity much more than 20% of the time. I mean, think about all the gray days we had here recently, right? I mean, we've had a couple sunny days, so now you're thinking, oh yeah, that's really pumping out, but it's probably not even connected to the grid, you know? So the facts, along with the intractable problem of hazardous waste disposal associated with solar panels, is one reason why they're a terrible investment. Now, just from my perspective, put my notes in here. In Hermon, we're paying to do a very expensive remediation of PFAS. So I looked up the dangers of PFAS. They don't have any specific, they're very general about what they say PFAS does. There's nothing specific. They don't really know for sure. They say it settles in the blood, liver, and kidneys, but the levels are debatable and definitive dangers are not fully enumerated. You know, they haven't done much studies on it, apparently. They just know it's got to be bad, so it can be cleaned up with a carbon filter. PFAS can. Cadmium cannot. Cadmium is definitively shown to cause cancer. Yet we add these solar panels to our environment on every hill and dale without thought to the future Americans that will live here. I'm sure they will thank us for looking after their futures if they can reproduce. All that rental or lease money that parents want to give their grandchildren and children, okay? It won't do them any good because they can't even drink the water. So that's one of the things you have to look at. What are we putting in the water? And I don't think anybody's really looked at the chemicals that are in the water and in those solar panels. And like I say, if any of them are broken or cracked or anything like that, it's leaching into the groundwater wherever they sit. Okay, thank you. Just my wanted to put a little different emphasis.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to just follow up on Danielle's question. I think it's good to ask, the flavor sense from the council, which way we're leaning. Me personally, I'm uncomfortable with the large scale solar arrays. I think you guys have done an incredible job pulling the
this ordinance together. You guys have worked on it, you know, for quite some time. But I see very limited upside for the town by moving ahead with the large solar arrays, so that's where I'm at.
I think what I'm seeing is that the town council at the present time, if I had to guess, probably wouldn't approve this ordinance with large scale in it. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's what I'm looking at. So I guess the question mark is, you know, is that something we just remove completely? You know, do we, no offense to the 3 members of the public here, but do we try and get more input from the residents on what they think, or, you know, or do we make the move, you know, make the revision again, which, trust me, it's not hard to make a revision of that, and, you know, Jessica's been getting very good at getting those resolutions. All I gotta do is look at how Tim's looked on the last one, you know. So I see this as being more important to take the time and do it right. And if we're gonna go through all this and, you know, get to a point where it's just a stop, I'd rather take the time, revisit it, listen to the input, and come up with another plan. That's my viewpoint. I don't know what the other planning board members are thinking as well, and Jessica, but there's been a lot of, you know, valid points that are raised, and thank you, ma'am. I was curious, that's why I was typing in the old Google search. I think Maine's at 23%.
23%.
That's
That's what they say.
That's what they say.
Yeah,
Right.
I know. That's what I know what the wind farms say too.
Right. But it's 7%. Solar accounts for 7% of the energy generated in Maine.
Oh, if they were hooked up, it would.
Anyway, like we've all said,
I'm a little cynical, sorry.
no, none of us are, you know, really expert in this, other than we do want to feel like we're doing the best we can for this community. And, you know, Mr. Wood put it out there very clearly that, you know, the last sentence of the mission is to protect the rural character of our community. Mr. Byers had good comments too. If we can't see it from the road, you know, how is that impacting our rural aspect of it? So I think there are things to look at, and I think we'll hit it again. I think that's the best way to look at it. Objection to that?
Can I add one more thing to that?
Yes,
You
sir.
wanna Google it, but there are facilities that are recycling these things, and they're actually paying for them to get them. They break them down completely, isolate every material that's in there, and then they sell it for market, or if there's anything left that they can't dispose, it's disposed of. Most all of these are out of state right now, but they are doing it. So the solar fella that I deal with is, his hope is that the current solar company fails on his land, because then he can take it over. The profit is a lot different if they don't follow through. But I can assure you, on my own property, knowing that they want these things, I can recycle all the steel, I can recycle all the wire, and then my land's back. It'd probably take me a week to do it. The amount of solar panels that are left wouldn't even fill that space in a 10-acre plot. So I don't understand the fear of what these actually are. It just doesn't make any sense in my head.
I'm curious, Jeff, how many acres were you looking to do?
It all depends. It may be 0, you know, but
Before this meeting, we were looking at less
as
than
the
10.
absolute goal, I'd like to do 20 acres, but the state isn't even going to allow that at the time. So we're probably looking at 7. If I can come back, it would be another 7. But it's not around anybody. You know, this is land that's got nothing but trees on it, and I've kept it that way instead of building house lots on it, which drives the taxes in this town. I'm a builder, why wouldn't I want to do it? But that's not what I want. I want the taxes to stay lower for a generation that's aging, and a few of us understand retirement. So why do you want higher taxes? It just doesn't make any sense. If you can get money for taxing them or getting your non-revenue money, and you can still get something from it. You get power that's just spread out for where the three-phase is, because you cannot build them where there is no three-phase. Even the industrial parks, the jump to get from where some of that land is, what's usable and what's not, you can't make it to the line. It's too expensive to build the three-phase. So you have to be close enough to do it.
Thank you. I've only got 27 more years before I can retire, so that's pretty good.
Oh, come on.
If we move forward with the large scale, and also maybe something to consider with the personal, is I think there should be language in here that gives the city the ability to inspect at any time. Because if there are toxic chemicals in there, I think that we need to have that ability. And maybe even if we do the large scale, it needs to be the standard, that there's an inspection done on whatever basis to ensure that there is no damage to the solar panels and no harm being done to the area. I didn't think I saw that language in here, but it might be something worth considering.
Thank you.
One other thing, if we remove large scale, I think we should also have language in here that immediately triggers a moratorium in the event the state says that our ordinance is out of compliance, and we then have to allow them so that there's no gap between us, you got what I'm saying.
I do. I don't know if I've heard of any, I mean, you never know what's gonna go on there, but I haven't heard that the state has been pushing for no moratoriums. You never know. But yeah, I mean, I like I said, this has been an extremely informative and good feedback, a good meeting. That's our, you know, it doesn't matter if we do this 10 more times. The planning board's role is that, and that's what we'll do, and continue to try and get it. I don't know if we're ever gonna get anything 100% correct, but we can try our best to get everything in there and see if it's an acceptable version for the majority.
And I do know of somebody that could probably come talk to either the council or the planning board. I think he was here at the last planning board meeting. He knows all about this stuff. He's very educated. As a matter of fact, I think I heard from him that they're not using those toxic chemicals in these new panels they're making anymore. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure he said that at the last time he was here.
Was that an individual who's with a company?
Yes. But he's a straight shooter.
I appreciate that. I'm just want to make sure we're getting all the, you know, how do I put it? I want to make sure that we're having the fair and balanced. How's that? And I'm pretty sure I don't know this person, but I just remember that you were sitting over there.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Do you have anything further on? Do we have anything further on this topic? Knowing that we're gonna kind of get back to the drawing board on a few things. I mean, the positive is this is a large document, and you know, I think there's 5 areas that we're gonna concentrate on. So that's something that planning board would just put from workshop. Yeah. I mean, we don't really have any. There's nothing to be voted on. There's no nothing of that. I just think that it's excellent conversation. So with that said, we're going to move on to CEO items, and we'll have our November, December, January code reports. Which this is something that I think the last time we met, you saw Jessica does a good job of providing reports on, you know, the stats, the data, what's going on in the community. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
And
Thanks, Jeff.
hopefully you'd like to go over your report.
Yeah, so when I was going through the numbers for my annual report, I'm still working on it, I haven't turned in yet. The 2021 formulas were a little off, so when you go to the January section, some of those numbers for the accessory and single family home bumped back up. But it's been pretty steady. The one area where we've seen a lot of growth is in the multi-units, the 4+ units throughout town. Those have grown quite substantially. The housing has sort of leveled out a little bit, new single-family homes. You know, we're getting to that point where lots are coming harder and harder to come by, so I do expect, we'll have one more subdivision brought before the planning board. We've seen the preliminary for it, so one more 14 lot. Then I think it's pretty slow after that, so, I think single family homes will start to decline a little bit.
Quite a jump in the interest rate.
Yep.
The material costs are still outrageous.
So, but other than that, we're busy.
Thank you. I mean, these are the things that are very helpful, and when I see, I didn't realize, I see now code enforcement officer, health safety officer, IT services, everything, legal, guidance, all right. But no, these are very good, so this is a plus of what we get, so we can see, and it is helpful to see that the trends are going like this, and then starting to go down, starting to go back up, so, thank you. Excuse me. Planning board items. This is where the planning board can bring up any questions, comments, concerns to the board and to the code enforcement officer. Anyone, we'll start with Greg, you got anything? Nope. Kurt?
So, I received a flyer where some company is trying to get people to rent their land to put vehicles on. And I haven't looked into it, but I thought it was kind of strange.
What kind of vehicles?
Like whatever, boats,
Yeah.
cars.
Oh, for storage?
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
just in your
storage.
yard for
Yeah.
storage.
Oh, I got that too. I threw mine away.
I guess they didn't send me one.
I thought it was quite odd. But, you got one too?
I got one, yeah.
I'll take a look at that.
Yeah. I don't think it's I don't think we can. I think it's illegal in most zones. I thought it was quite odd that they would be sending this stuff out. And the company's from Utah.
It kind of looks like my yard right now, though.
Well, you got teenagers.
Kyle?
Nothing.
Yeah? It's funny you say Utah. I think that's where, there's a company that's been, they send out a bunch of stuff for empty land. You know, land that does not have a dwelling on it. And they say it's valued at X amount for the town, and call us, we'll give you an offer, and we'll buy that land. And I don't know if anyone's gone through with that, but,
I've had a few phone calls about it, and the odd thing is they're all a certain dollar amount. They're all $27,343 or something like that. So.
that's what you can get for that. You can, not saying you will.
Right.
But I don't have anything other than, you know, my usual stuff that will, come spring, we'll be talking about some stuff that's gonna get done.
Yep. I do have one thing. I'll need Deb and Kurt to sign, 2 plans. That's from, ironically, the Dysart Solar. I did that back in October. They needed, the updated signed copy for that, so.
Okay, this is where we have our final public items or comments for, anything that wasn't on the agenda. Your window of opportunity, Chad. Seeing as none, we'll, move on for a motion to adjourn.
I was second.
Approve and must have. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, ma'am, for your, article and insight.